The train's whistle pierced through the Montana winter like a lonely cry, its black smoke dissipating into the iron-gray sky. Sarah Bennett clutched her worn carpetbag tighter as the locomotive groaned to a halt at Cedar Ridge Station, her knuckles white beneath threadbare gloves. The December wind cut through her thin traveling dress, finding every gap in the fabric, every place where the seams had been mended one too many times. She was the last passenger to descend, her legs trembling whether from the cold or fear. She couldn't tell. The wooden platform creaked under her boots as she searched the small crowd for a face she'd only seen in a faded photograph. Her heart hammered against her ribs when she spotted him, Harold Whitman, standing near the station house, his expression already twisted with disappointment. "Miss Bennett," his voice carried the same chill as the wind. He approached slowly, his eyes traveling from her mud-splattered hem to her wind-swept hair. "You're smaller than I expected." Sarah straightened her spine. "Mr. Whitman, I've traveled 3 days to—" And plainer. He circled her like a buyer examining livestock at auction. "The agency said you could cook and keep house. They didn't mention you looked like a half-starved sparrow." Heat flooded her cheeks despite the cold. "Sir, I assure you, I'm quite capable." "Capable?" He laughed, a harsh sound that drew stares from the other travelers hurrying past. "Look at those hands. Have you ever worked a day in your life, ever wrung a chicken's neck, scrubbed lye into floorboards until your knuckles bled?" Sarah's hands trembled as she tucked them behind her back. "I can learn. I'm willing to work hard." Harold shook his head, already backing away. "This was a mistake. I paid good money for a wife, not another mouth to feed through winter." He pulled an envelope from his coat pocket and tossed it at her feet. "There's enough for a ticket back east. Don't expect more." The envelope landed in a puddle of melted snow. Sarah stared at it, her vision blurring. "Please, Mr. Whitman, I have nowhere else." But he was already walking away, his boots crunching on the frozen ground. The other passengers had dispersed, leaving her alone on the platform with the station master, who avoided her gaze and retreated into his office. Sarah picked up the envelope with numb fingers. Inside were 3 crumpled bills, barely enough for a meal, let alone passage back to Baltimore, back to the factory where she'd coughed up cotton dust for 12 hours a day, back to the boarding house where girls disappeared in the night, either to marriage or worse fates. The wind picked up, driving ice crystals against her face. The sun was already sinking behind the mountains, painting the snow-covered peaks the color of blood. She had no money for lodging, no connections in this frontier town. The saloon across the street belched out raucous laughter and lamplight, but she knew what kind of work awaited desperate women behind those doors. She dragged her carpetbag to a bench under the station's overhang and sat down, trying to make herself small. Maybe if she waited until dark, she could slip into the livery stable, burrow into the hay like an animal. The thought should have shamed her, but she was beyond shame now. Only survival mattered. Well, what have we here?" 3 men emerged from the saloon's warmth, their breath forming clouds in the frigid air. They swayed slightly, bottles glinting in their hands. Sarah's stomach clenched as they approached, their grins too wide, their eyes too bright. "Looks like someone left a pretty package at the station," the tallest one said, his words slurred. "All alone, too. That ain't safe. Miss, not safe at all." Sarah stood, clutching her bag. "I'm waiting for someone." "That so?" Another man, stockier with a graying beard, moved to block her path. "Been watching you near an hour. Ain't nobody coming for you, sweetheart." The third man, younger with a pockmarked face, reached for her arm. "Come on now, we'll keep you warm. Got a nice fire going at Murphy's place." Sarah jerked away, but they formed a half-circle, backing her against the station wall. The smell of whiskey and unwashed bodies made her stomach turn. "Please, leave me be." "Leave her be." The voice cut through the cold like a blade. The men turned to find a tall figure standing at the platform's edge, a small child bundled in his arms. even in the fading light. Sarah could see the hard set of his jaw, the way his free hand rested on the gun at his hip. "This ain't your concern, McCrae," the bearded man said, but his bravado had dimmed. "I'm making it my concern." The man McCrae shifted the child to his other arm. Even that small movement revealed the controlled power in his frame. "You boys best head back to the saloon. Now." The younger man opened his mouth to protest, but the tall one grabbed his shoulder. They knew this man, Sarah realized. Knew him and feared him. They retreated, grumbling and casting dark looks over their shoulders. McCrae waited until they disappeared into the saloon before approaching. Up close, Sarah could see his face properly weathered by sun and wind, with lines that spoke of both laughter and loss. The child in his arms, a girl no more than 4, peered at Sarah with curious hazel eyes. "Ma'am." He touched the brim of his hat. "You shouldn't be out here alone. Temperature's dropping fast." Sarah's teeth had begun to chatter. I have nowhere else to go." His eyes gray as the winter sky took in her thin dress, her carpet bag, the envelope still clutched in her hand. Understanding dawned on his face. Mail order bride. She nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. "And he turned you away?" It wasn't a question. His jaw tightened. "Harold Whitman's a fool and worse. Always has been." The little girl squirmed in his arms. "Papa, I'm cold." "I know, sweetheart." He studied Sarah for a long moment, seeming to wage some internal battle. "Finally," he sighed. "You can't stay here. You'll freeze before morning." Sarah lifted her chin, clinging to the last shreds of her pride. "I'll manage." "No, you won't." He said it matter-of-factly, without cruelty. "Those men will be back once they've drunk enough courage. And even if they don't, this cold will kill you just as sure." He shifted the child again and shrugged out of his heavy coat. Holding it out to Sarah, she stared at it, at him, too stunned to move. "Take it," he said. "I've got the wagon just there. You'll ride with us." I don't even know you." "Name's Jake McCrae. This is my daughter, Emma." The little girl gave a shy wave. "I've got a ranch about 5 miles up the mountain. You can stay in the barn tonight. It's warm and dry. Tomorrow, we'll figure out something better." Sarah looked into his eyes, searching for deception, for the kind of hunger she'd seen in the drunk men's faces. But there was only weariness there, and perhaps a shadow of grief that matched her own. "Why?" she whispered. He glanced down at his daughter, then back at Sarah. "Because Emma's mother would have haunted me something fierce if I left a woman to freeze on Christmas week." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "And because I know what it's like to be alone in the cold." Sarah's resolve crumbled. She took the coat with shaking hands, drowning in its warmth and the scent of leather and wood smoke. "Thank you. Thank me tomorrow if you still want to." He nodded toward a covered wagon hitched near the general store. "Can you walk?" She nodded, though her feet felt like blocks of ice. Jake carried Emma with one arm and took Sarah's carpet bag with his free hand, leading the way through the deepening snow. The wagon was old but well-maintained, with canvas stretched tight over wooden hoops. He set Emma on the bench seat and helped Sarah climb up, his hands careful and impersonal. As he took up the reins, Sarah huddled deeper into his coat, watching the lights of Cedar Ridge fade behind them. The road wound upward into the mountains, through stands of pine that blocked out the stars. Emma dozed against her father's shoulder, making small sounds of contentment. "I'm Sarah," she said finally, needing to fill the silence. "Sarah Bennett." He glanced at her. "Where are you from?" "Miss Bennett." "Baltimore. Long way from home." Home. The word stung. "I have no home. Not anymore." He didn't press, for which she was grateful. The wagon rolled on, wheels crunching through fresh powder. The cold was brutal, seeping through every layer, but at least she was moving towards shelter, toward warmth. It was more than she'd had an hour ago. "There," Jake said eventually, pointing to lights glowing in the distance. "That's the Triple C." As they drew closer, Sarah could make out the silhouette of a modest ranch house, smoke rising from its chimney. A large barn stood beside it, along with what looked like a chicken coop and other outbuildings. It wasn't grand, but it looked solid. Permanent, everything she wasn't. Jake pulled the wagon up to the barn and climbed down, Emma stirring in his arms. "Wait here." He disappeared inside, and Sarah heard the scratch of a match, saw warm light bloom through the doorway. He returned and helped her down, her legs barely holding her weight. The barn's interior was blessedly warm, filled with the sweet smell of hay and the soft sounds of horses. Jake had lit a lantern and hung it from a beam. In the golden light, she could see a clean stall filled with fresh straw. "It's not much," he said, setting down her carpetbag, "but it's warm and safe. I'll bring out some blankets and food." Mr. McCrae Jake, I don't know how to thank you." He paused at the door, Emma drowsing against his shoulder. "No thanks needed. Just get warm. Get some rest. Things always look better in the morning." Then they were gone, leaving Sarah alone in the circle of lamplight. She sank onto the straw, pulling his coat tighter around her shoulders. Through the barn door, she could see the house, its windows glowing like eyes in the darkness. A real home, with a real family, everything she'd thought she was coming here to find. Instead, she was sleeping in a barn like the Christ child, with no gold, frankincense, or myrrh, only the kindness of a stranger and the faint hope that tomorrow might truly be better. She closed her eyes and let the tears come at last, hot against her frozen cheeks. While outside, the Montana wind howled its lonesome song. Sarah woke to the sound of a rooster crowing and pale morning light filtering through the barn's gaps. For a moment, she forgot where she was. Then the events of yesterday crashed back the rejection, the cold, the kindness of a stranger. She sat up in the straw, Jake's coat still wrapped around her, and noticed a bundle near the door blankets, a tin cup of water, and what looked like biscuits wrapped in cloth. Her stomach growled at the sight of food, but shame kept her frozen. She was 23 years old, educated enough to read and write. Yet here she was sleeping in a barn like a vagrant. Through a crack in the wall, she could see the ranch house, smoke already rising from its chimney. Real life happening without her. As always, the barn door creaked open. Sarah tensed, but it was only little Emma, still in her nightgown with a shawl thrown over her shoulders. "Papa says you're to come inside," the child announced. "He's making porridge." "I shouldn't impose." "What's impose mean?" Emma tilted her head, her tangled hair catching the morning light. Sarah found herself almost smiling. "It means I don't want to be trouble." "Oh," Emma considered this. "Well, Papa's already in a mood 'cause I tracked snow through the kitchen. More trouble won't matter much." Despite everything, Sarah felt her lips twitch. She stood, brushing straw from her skirts. "In that case, lead the way." The house was modest but clean, with wood floors that showed years of scrubbing and windows hung with faded calico curtains. The main room served as both kitchen and living space, with a large stove radiating blessed warmth. Jake stood at the stove, his back to them, stirring something in a pot. He'd changed into fresh clothes, but his hair was still mussed from sleep. "Sit," he said without turning. "Food's almost ready." Sarah perched on the edge of a chair, feeling out of place among the domestic scene. Emma climbed onto another chair, swinging her legs. The table bore the marks of daily life scratches, water rings, a child's pencil drawing scattered across one corner. Jake set bowls before them, the porridge thick and steaming. "It's not fancy, but it'll stick to your ribs." Sarah took a spoonful, the warmth spreading through her chest. "It's perfect, thank you." They ate in relative silence. broken only by Emma's chatter about her rag doll and the barn cat who'd had kittens. Sarah found herself watching Jake from under her lashes, in daylight. She could see he was younger than she'd first thought, maybe 30, with the kind of hands that spoke of hard work and the kind of eyes that had seen too much. "I can work," Sarah said suddenly, "to earn my keep. I can clean, mend, help with—" "When's the last time you milked a cow?" Jake interrupted. Sarah's cheeks flushed. "Never, but I can learn. Wrung washing in winter, split kindling plucked a chicken." Each question was another stone in her stomach. "No, but nothing." He pushed back from the table. "This ain't Baltimore. Miss Bennett. Winter here will kill you if you don't respect it." Emma looked between them with wide eyes. "Papa, you're being mean." "I'm being honest." But his voice softened as he looked at his daughter. "Finish your breakfast." "Em?" Sarah stood abruptly, pride overcoming sense. "I'll gather my things. I'm sorry to have troubled you." "Sit down." The command in his voice made her pause. Jake ran a hand through his hair, suddenly looking tired. "I'm not throwing you out. I'm trying to make you understand what you're facing." She sat slowly. "I understand I have no choices left." "There's always choices. Question is whether you're strong enough to make them." He studied her, taking in her soft hands, her careful posture. "You ever done washing?" "Yes." Finally, something she could claim. "At the factory and at the boarding house." "Good. Emma's clothes are piling up, and mine too. Martha Robbins used to come weekly, but she's been poorly." He nodded toward a door off the main room. "Washboard and tubs are in there. You do the washing today. We'll see about tomorrow." It was a test, Sarah realized. She lifted her chin. "I'll need hot water." "Pumps outside, stoves right there." He shrugged into his coat. "I'll be in the barn. Emma, you help Miss Bennett find what she needs." He left, taking the warmth of the room with him. Sarah looked at Emma, who grinned gap-toothed. "Papa likes you," the child announced. "I don't think so." "He gave you his coat. He don't give nobody nothing, 'cept me." Emma jumped down from her chair. "Come on, I'll show you where the soap is." The next hours were a blur of work harder than any Sarah had known. The pump handle was frozen. She had to pour hot water over it before it would budge. Each bucket of water felt heavier than the last as she hauled them inside. The lye soap burned her hands raw. The washboard scraped her knuckles until they bled. But she persisted, dunking shirt after shirt. Emma's small dresses, bed sheets that hadn't seen washing in too long. The child helped where she could, chattering constantly about everything and nothing, her favorite hen, the mean bull in the far pasture, how her papa could whistle any tune. "Mama used to sing when she washed," Emma said suddenly, her voice going quiet. "Before she went to heaven." Sarah's hand stilled in the water. "When did she go to heaven?" "Last winter. The baby came too early, and they both went together." Emma picked at a splinter in the washboard. "Papa don't like to talk about it." Sarah's heart clenched. She reached out with a sudsy hand to touch Emma's hair. "I'm sorry." "Me too." Then, with the resilience of childhood, "You sing." "Not well." "Don't matter. Mama said it's the singing that counts, not the sound." So Sarah sang old hymns from childhood, folk songs from the factory girls, even a silly ditty about a frog. Emma joined in where she knew the words, and the work seemed lighter somehow, shared between them. By the time Jake returned for the noon meal, the kitchen was draped with drying clothes. The fire crackled hot, the windows were steamed, and Sarah's dress was soaked through. She'd found bread and preserved meat, set out a simple meal. Jake surveyed the scene, his expression unreadable. "You've been busy." "The sheets still need—" Sarah started to rise, but her legs buckled. She caught herself on the table edge, embarrassed. When's the last time you ate a real meal? Jake asked.
Before yesterday.
She didn't answer, which was answer enough. He pulled out a chair. Sit. Eat. When she hesitated, he added, Can't work if you faint dead away. They ate quietly while Emma napped on the settee, worn out from her helping. Sarah was acutely aware of her appearance, hair straggling from its pins, dress damp and stained. Jake seemed to be studying her again, but differently now. Where'd you learn those songs?
My mother, mostly, before she died.
No family left.
None that would claim me.
She met his gaze.
That's why I answered the advertisement. A new start. Somewhere I could belong.
And you got Harold Whitman. Jake's mouth twisted. Man's been through 3 mail-order brides. Sends them all back, or they run off. You might have mentioned that yesterday. Would it have changed anything? She considered. No, I still would have had nowhere else to go. That's what I figured. He pushed back from the table. You did good with the washing. Tomorrow you can help with the mending. There's a pile tall as Emma. I'm staying then. For now. Can't pay much room and board. Maybe $1 a week if cattle prices hold. He paused at the door. That acceptable. $1 a week was less than she'd made at the factory. But room and board safety, warmth, purpose that was worth more than money. Yes, more than acceptable. He nodded and left again. Sarah sat in the warm kitchen, listening to Emma's soft breathing, watching the clothes sway in the heat like gentle ghosts. Outside, snow began to fall again, but inside she was warm, fed, needed. It wasn't the life she'd imagined when she'd answered that advertisement, but maybe, just maybe, it could be enough. That evening, after a supper of beans and cornbread, Jake brought out the mending. The pile was indeed as tall as Emma's shirts with torn seams, socks with holes, Emma's dresses with ripped hems. Sarah settled by the fire with needle and thread, while Jake worked on harness repairs and Emma played with her doll. You sew neat, Emma observed, watching Sarah's quick stitches. My mother taught me she was a seamstress.
What's a seamstress?
Someone who sews for a living, makes dresses and such. Emma's eyes widened. Could you make me a dress? A pretty one? Emma, Jake warned. If I had fabric, Sarah said carefully. And time. There's cloth in the trunk, Emma said eagerly.
Mama's cloth. She was going to make curtains, but then...
That's enough. Jake's voice was sharp. Emma's face fell, and she returned to her doll. An uncomfortable silence settled. Sarah kept her eyes on her work, wondering about the woman who'd lived here before, who'd planned curtains she'd never hang, who'd left behind a grieving husband and lonely daughter. When Emma finally dozed off, Jake carried her to bed. He returned and stood awkwardly by the fire. About the fabric, he started. If you need it for clothes, for you or Emma, I wouldn't presume. It's not presuming if I'm offering. He stared into the flames. Rebecca bought it last spring. Said the house needed brightening. Never got around to it. I'm sorry for your loss. He was quiet so long she thought he wouldn't respond. Then, she was young, younger than you. Thought she was strong enough for this life, but he shrugged. The winter was hard, and the baby came early. Doc couldn't get through the snow in time. Sarah set down her sewing.
That's why you helped me, because of her.
Maybe, or maybe because I know what it's like to lose everything. He turned to her. You're not what I expected from a Baltimore factory girl. What did you expect? Someone harder, rougher. You've got educated written all over you. Sarah's hand stilled. My father was a schoolmaster before he died. I helped with lessons. After... She shrugged. Education doesn't fill empty bellies. No, but it might fill empty heads. Emma's bright, needs learning. Hope flickered. I could teach her reading, writing, arithmetic. In exchange for room and board, I thought I was already earning that with housework. The ghost of a smile touched his lips. Maybe we could work out something extra, if you're good. She smiled back, the first real smile in days. I'm good. They settled into comfortable quiet, the fire crackling between them. Outside, the wind howled, but inside was warmth and peace and the promise of tomorrow. Sarah picked up her needle again, mending the tears in fabric and, perhaps, beginning to mend other tears as well. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the snow as Sarah made her way to the chicken coop, her breath forming clouds in the frigid air. She'd been at the Triple C for a week now, finding her rhythm in the daily chores, earning her place through blistered hands and aching muscles. Emma skipped beside her, chattering about the ornery rooster who ruled the henhouse. His name's Napoleon, Emma announced. Papa says he's got delusions of grandeur. What's that mean? It means he thinks he's more important than he really is, Sarah explained, smiling at the child's serious expression. Like Mrs. Henderson at church. Sarah bit back a laugh. In the past days, Emma had become her shadow, following her through chores, peppering her with questions, slowly filling the quiet corners of Sarah's heart. The child was starved for feminine attention, for the gentle touches and patient answers her mother would have provided. They'd just gathered the eggs when Jake appeared, his face tight with barely controlled anger. Get inside, both of you. But Papa. Now, Emma. The urgency in his voice sent them hurrying. Through the kitchen window, Sarah saw why a group of riders approaching, their horses kicking up snow. She recognized one immediately. Harold Whitman, the man who'd abandoned her at the station. Emma, go to your room, Jake ordered. But, mind me, girl. Emma fled, but Sarah saw her peek around the doorframe. Jake positioned himself by the door, hand resting on his rifle. Sarah's heart hammered as boots stomped on the porch. McCrae, Harold's voice boomed. Open up. We need to talk. Jake opened the door but didn't step aside. State your business. Whitman. Harold pushed past him. 3 other men following. His eyes found Sarah immediately, narrowing with contempt. There she is, the little fraud. Watch your tongue in my house, Jake warned. Your house? Harold laughed unpleasantly. Keeping another man's bride, that's low, even for you. Sarah stepped forward, anger overcoming fear. I'm not your bride. You made that clear when you left me to freeze. I paid good money for you, Harold spat. Sent funds to the agency, bought your ticket. You owe me. I owe you nothing. Sarah's voice shook but held firm. You took one look at me and decided I wasn't worth common decency. One of Harold's companions, a thin man with calculating eyes, spoke up. Way we see it. McCrae, you're harboring stolen property. Girl was bought and paid for. Jake's stance shifted subtly, dangerously. Last I checked, we fought a war about buying and selling people. This is different, Harold insisted. She entered into a contract. A contract you broke the moment you abandoned her. Jake interrupted. Any claim you had ended there? Harold's face reddened. The whole town's talking. Jake McCrae. Plain house with a desperate woman. Your wife ain't even cold in the ground. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Jake's voice, when it came, was deadly quiet. Get out. Not without what's mine. She's not yours. Jake stepped forward. Never was. Never will be. Now get off my land before I help you off. Harold looked between them, his sneer deepening. This ain't over. Girl's got a debt to pay, one way or another. And you, he pointed at Jake, you've made an enemy today. They left in a thunder of boots and threats. Jake stood at the window, watching until they disappeared down the mountain road. Sarah sank into a chair, shaking. I'll leave, she whispered. Tonight, I won't bring more trouble." "You'll do no such thing." Jake turned from the window. "Harold Whitman's been a bully since we were boys. About time someone stood up to him." Emma crept from her hiding spot. "Is the mean man gone?" "Yes, sweetheart." Jake's voice gentled. "He's gone." The child ran to Sarah, wrapping thin arms around her waist. "You can't leave. You promised to teach me letters." Sarah hugged her back, tears threatening. Over Emma's head, she met Jake's eyes. "This will make things difficult for you. In town, with neighbors." "Let me worry about that." He moved to the stove, rattling the coffee pot. "Besides, I've got my own reputation. Not many willing to cross me directly." It should have been comforting, but Sarah heard what he didn't say, that whispers would follow them now, that her presence had marked them both. She thought of the women in town, their cold stares when she'd accompanied Jake for supplies earlier in the week. Now those stares would turn to condemnation. That evening, after Emma was abed, Sarah found Jake on the porch despite the bitter cold. He stood at the rail, staring out at the snow-covered valley below. "You should be inside," he said without turning. She pulled her shawl tighter. "So should you." They stood in silence, breath misting in the moonlight. "Finally," Jake spoke. "Rebecca came here as a mail-order bride too. Did you know that—" Sarah's breath caught. "No." "Difference was, I'm the one who sent for her." He laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Thought I was being practical. Ranch needed a woman's touch. I needed a wife. Simple transaction." "But you loved her." "Learned to. She was sunshine. Even in winter. She made everything brighter." His hands gripped the rail. "Then I killed her." "Jake, no. I got her with child, out here, miles from help, knowing how dangerous it could be." His voice roughened. "She was so small. Like you, I should have known. Should have been more careful." Sarah moved closer, close enough to feel the radiating tension in his frame. "You can't blame yourself for nature's cruelty." "Can't I?" He turned to face her, and she saw the raw grief there. "I buried her on the hillside, where she liked to watch the sunrise. The baby a boy lies with her. Some mornings I still expect to see her in the kitchen, singing." Without thought, Sarah reached out, laying her hand over his on the rail. "She wouldn't want you drowning in guilt." He looked down at her hand, so small against his weathered one. "Why aren't you afraid of me?" "Should I be?" "Harold's right about one thing. I've got a reputation. Done things I'm not proud of to keep this ranch. To survive out here." Sarah thought of his gentleness with Emma, the quiet way he'd repaired her boots without mentioning it, how he'd stood between her and Harold's threats. "I've seen who you are when you think no one's watching. That tells me more than any reputation." Something shifted in his expression. For a moment, the careful distance he maintained cracked, showing the lonely man beneath. Then he pulled back, physically and emotionally. "You should go inside. Cold's not good for you." But Sarah held her ground. "I meant what I said earlier. I won't be the cause of more grief for you and Emma." "And I meant what I said. You're staying." His tone brooked no argument. "Harold Whitman doesn't dictate what happens on my land. The people in town have been gossiping about me for years. Let them add this to the pile." He moved toward the door, pausing with his hand on the latch. "You've brought something back to this house, Sarah. Something I thought died with Rebecca." Emma laughs again. "That's worth more than the good opinion of hypocrites and busybodies." He disappeared inside, leaving Sarah alone with the stars and her tumbling thoughts. She pressed her hand to where his had been on the rail, still feeling the warmth despite the cold. Inside, she found evidence of his quiet care, the fire banked high in her room, fresh water in the pitcher, an extra quilt laid across the foot of her bed. Such small kindnesses, offered without expectation or acknowledgement. She thought of Harold, who'd seen her only as a transaction gone wrong. Jake saw her as a person worthy of consideration. Later, unable to sleep, she heard Jake moving about the house. Floorboards creaked as he checked the locks, tended the fires, paused at Emma's door. The sounds of a man maintaining his vigil against the dark, protecting what was his. Sarah pulled the quilt higher, remembering her mother's words. Love isn't always grand gestures, my girl. Sometimes it's just someone making sure you're warm enough in the night. She'd come west seeking a husband, a position, security. Instead, she'd found something more complex, a wounded family still learning to heal. A man fighting his own demons while sheltering others. A child desperate for the mother she'd lost. It wasn't what she'd expected, but increasingly, Sarah wondered if it might be what she needed. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Harold wouldn't give up easily, and the town's judgment would grow harsher. But tonight, she was warm and safe, with a full belly and a purpose for the morning. Emma needed her letters lesson. Jake's shirts needed mending, and the bread dough needed starting early. Simple things, perhaps, but after years of hunger and uncertainty, Sarah was learning that simple things could be their own form of grace. She closed her eyes, listening to the house settle around her, and for the first time since leaving Baltimore, felt something that might have been hope. In the morning, she'd find Jake's coat hanging on her door, not mentioned, not explained, just there for her use. She'd understand then what he couldn't say, that protection came in many forms, and some shields were made of wool and kindness rather than steel. But that was tomorrow. Tonight, she drifted toward sleep, the sound of Jake's footsteps above her a strange lullaby, a promise that someone stood guard between her and the harsh world beyond these walls. The old clock on the mantel chimed midnight as Sarah folded the last of Jake's shirts, her fingers trembling not from cold but from the weight of decision. 3 weeks had passed since Harold's visit. 3 weeks of whispered conversations dying when she entered the general store, of women pulling their skirts aside when she passed, of men's eyes following her with speculation and worse. Today had been the breaking point. She'd gone to town with Jake for supplies, Emma between them on the wagon seat chattering about the Christmas pageant at church. Mrs. Henderson, the banker's wife, had stopped them outside the mercantile, her voice carrying clear across the street.
Jake McCrae, I'm surprised at you, flaunting your arrangement so publicly. What kind of example are you setting for that poor child?
Jake's jaw had tightened, but he'd kept his voice level.
Good day, Mrs. Henderson.
Don't you good day me. Your dear Rebecca must be turning in her grave, replaced so quickly by a woman of questionable reputation. Sarah had felt Emma's small hand slip into hers, squeezing tight. The child understood more than they gave her credit for, absorbed the poisonous words like a sponge. Sarah's reputation is spotless, Jake had said quietly, dangerously, which is more than I can say for some.
Mrs.
Henderson had huffed away, but the damage was done. The rest of their errands were completed in hostile silence, shopkeepers serving them with bare civility, other customers finding urgent business elsewhere when they approached. Now, in the quiet house with Jake checking the stock and Emma long abed, Sarah made her choice. She couldn't stay, not when her presence brought such censure, not when Emma would suffer for it. The child needed acceptance in this small community, needed to grow up without the taint of scandal. Sarah packed quietly, taking only what she'd brought, leaving behind the dress she'd made from Rebecca's fabric, the books Jake had found for Emma's lessons, the small comforts that had begun to make this place feel like home. She penned 2 notes, one for Jake explaining her decision, thanking him for his kindness, and one for Emma promising to write once she was settled. The money Jake had paid her these weeks would buy a ticket somewhere, Denver perhaps, or San Francisco, anywhere but here, where her very existence had become a burden to those who'd shown her only kindness. She slipped out the kitchen door, carpetbag in hand, Jake's coat left hanging on its peg. The moon was new, the path to town barely visible, but she knew the way now. Her boots crunched in the fresh snow, each step taking her further from the first real safety she'd known in years. The wind picked up as she descended the mountain road, driving ice crystals against her face. Her thin coat was no match for the cold, but she pressed on, driven by determination and the knowledge that staying would only bring more pain to the McCrae household. She was perhaps 2 miles from the ranch when she heard the horse behind her. Her heart sank. Of course Jake would check on her before bed, would find her note too soon. She kept walking, not trusting herself to face him. "Sarah." His voice cut through the wind. "Stop." She walked faster, but he was already dismounting, his boots hitting the ground hard. In moments, he was in front of her, blocking the path, his face a mixture of anger and something else in the darkness. "Were you even going to say goodbye? Just leave like a thief in the night?" "I explained in the letter."
I don't give a damn about your letter.
He grabbed her shoulders, not roughly but firmly.
You were going to walk to town? In this weather? Have you lost your mind?
"I can't stay." The words tumbled out, mixing with tears she hadn't realized were falling. "You heard Mrs. Henderson. The whole town thinks they're saying terrible things about you, about Emma growing up in a house of sin." "I'll let them talk." "No." She wrenched away from him. "You don't understand. Emma needs friends, needs to be accepted. She can't grow up ostracized because of me."
"Because of you?" Jake's laugh was harsh.
"Sarah, they've been talking about me since the day I brought Rebecca home. Before that, even, you think their opinion matters to me?"
"It should, for Emma's sake."
"For Emma's sake, I need you to stop running."
His voice gentled.
"She's already lost one mother. Don't make her lose another."
"I'm not her mother."
"No." He stepped closer, and she could see his face now in the starlight. "Then why does she cry out for you when she has nightmares? Why does she save the prettiest eggs for your breakfast? Why did she beg me to make sure you never leave?" Sarah's resolve wavered. "Jake, you think you're protecting us by leaving. You're destroying us." He ran a hand through his hair, agitated. "Emma barely spoke for months after Rebecca died. These past weeks, she's come alive again, because of you."
"The town. Hang the town."
He grabbed her carpetbag, tossing it aside. "You belong at the CCC, not because I paid you, not because you've got nowhere else, but because we need you, both of us." The wind howled around them, and Sarah shivered violently. Without hesitation, Jake pulled her against him, wrapping his coat around them both. She should have protested, should have maintained proper distance. But his warmth was too welcome, his solid presence too comforting. "You're not just hired help," he murmured against her hair. "Not anymore. You're family." "Families don't cause each other such trouble." "Sure they do. All the time." She felt his chest rumble with quiet laughter. "You think my parents approved when I married Rebecca, a mail-order bride from Philadelphia? They said I was making a mistake, that she wouldn't last a winter out here. But she did. She lasted 5 winters. Gave me Emma. Gave me happiness I didn't think I deserved." His arms tightened around her. "Then I lost her, and I thought that was my punishment for reaching above my station. Thought I was meant to be alone." Sarah pulled back enough to see his face. "You're not alone. You have Emma." "A child needs more than a broken father. She needs what you give her: patience, gentleness, the kind of teaching that goes beyond books." He cupped her face in his calloused hands. "I need what you give too. The house doesn't echo so much with you in it." "Jake!" Her voice broke. "I'm afraid. Of what people say, of disappointing you, of not being enough." "You're already enough. More than enough." His thumb brushed away her tears, the gesture unbearably tender. "Come home, Sarah. Please." Home? The word undid her completely. When had the CCC become home? When had this complicated, stubborn man and his precious daughter become her whole world? "I don't know how to be what you need," she whispered. You already are. Just stay, be yourself. That's all we need. She searched his face, finding truth there, finding something deeper she wasn't quite ready to name. Slowly, she nodded. Relief transformed his features. Without warning, he lifted her into his arms, carrying her back toward his horse. No more walking in the snow. You'll catch your death. I can walk. Hush, let me take care of you for once. He settled her on his horse, then swung up behind her, his arms coming around to take the reins. She leaned back against his chest, surrendering to his strength, to the inevitable pull of the Triple C. Mrs. Henderson will have apoplexy, she murmured. Good. Woman needs some excitement in her life. He nudged the horse into motion. Besides, I've been thinking, all this gossip about improper arrangements, there's a simple solution. Sarah's heart skipped. Jake? Not tonight. Tonight. You're half frozen and wholly exhausted. But soon, we're going to talk about making things proper. The right way this time, not some business arrangement through the mail. She turned in his arms to study his profile. Is that what you want? He glanced down at her, and even in the darkness, she could see the warmth in his eyes. What I want is to stop worrying you'll disappear every time the town biddies wag their tongues. What I want is Emma to call you Mama without confusion. What I want... He paused, seeming to gather courage. What I want is you, Sarah Bennett, all of you, permanent-like. Her breath caught. That's not a proper proposal. No, it's not. When I do it proper, you'll know. He smiled then, a real smile that transformed his weathered features. For now, just come home. Home. There it was again, that word that meant everything. As they rode through the darkness, Jake's warmth at her back and his promise in her heart. Sarah finally stopped running. Whatever came next, gossip. Judgment. The complicated dance of two wounded hearts learning to trust she would face it. Because Jake was right. She belonged at the Triple C, belonged with this man who saw her worth when the rest of the world saw only scandal. Belonged with a little girl who needed a mother's love. It wasn't the life she'd planned when she'd boarded that train in Baltimore, but increasingly, Sarah understood that the best things in life rarely were. The ranch appeared before them, windows glowing warmly in the darkness. As Jake helped her down, steadying her with gentle hands, the front door burst open. Emma stood there in her nightgown, tears streaming down her face. You came back, the child flew into Sarah's arms. I woke up and you were gone, and I thought Papa said you'd never leave, but... Shh, sweet girl. I'm here. I'm not going anywhere. Over Emma's head, Sarah met Jake's eyes. He nodded once, a promise and a seal. Tomorrow would bring its challenges. But tonight, she was home. Tonight, that was enough. The sound of splintering wood and Jake's sharp cry of pain shattered the peaceful morning. Sarah dropped the bread dough she'd been kneading and ran toward the barn, her heart hammering against her ribs. She found him on the ground near the corral, his leg bent at an unnatural angle, blood seeping through his torn trousers. Damned horse spooked, he ground out through clenched teeth. Caught me against the fence rail. Sarah's hands shook as she knelt beside him, but she forced her voice to remain steady. Emma, bring clean cloths from the kitchen. Quickly now. The child, who'd been collecting eggs, stood frozen with terror. Papa! Do as Sarah says, sweetheart. I'm all right. Emma ran, and Sarah gently examined the wound. The gash was deep, running from knee to mid-thigh, and she could see white bone through the torn flesh. Her stomach turned, but she pushed down the nausea. He needed her steady, needed her strong. We have to get you inside, she said. Just bind it here. I can walk. No. The firmness in her voice surprised them both. That cut needs proper cleaning and stitching. You'll do as I say. Despite his pain, Jake's mouth quirked. Yes, ma'am. With effort and much cursing on Jake's part, they got him into the house. Sarah sent Emma to her room, not wanting the child to see what came next. She'd helped tend injuries at the boarding house, but nothing like this, nothing where the patient mattered so much. She cut away his trousers, trying not to think about the impropriety of it. The wound was worse fully exposed, jagged and deep, still bleeding freely. Her hands trembled as she threaded a needle. "You ever done this before?" Jake asked, his face pale but eyes alert. "Once, on a girl who caught her arm in machinery." She didn't mention that the girl had screamed through the entire procedure, or that the wound had festered despite her efforts. "Sarah," he caught her hand, stilling its shaking. "You can do this." She met his eyes, drawing strength from the trust she found there. "It's going to hurt." "I know, but I trust you." She cleaned the wound with whiskey, and Jake's whole body went rigid. His hand found hers, gripping tight enough to hurt, but he made no sound. As she began to stitch, memories crashed over her. Another man, another time, hands that gripped to hurt rather than seek comfort. She faltered, the needle slipping. "Sarah," Jake's voice, strained but gentle, pulled her back. "What is it?" "Nothing, I just—" She couldn't explain about Robert, the factory foreman who'd cornered her in the supply room, whose hands had left bruises that took weeks to fade. It was part of why she'd answered the advertisement, fled Baltimore for a place where no one knew her shame. Jake's free hand touched her cheek, the gesture so tender it nearly undid her. "I won't hurt you. Whatever you're remembering, it's not here. Not now." She looked at him, this man who'd sheltered her without question, who'd stood against the town's censure for her sake, who even in his pain thought first of her comfort. "I know. You're nothing like him?" Understanding dawned in his eyes, followed by a flash of rage quickly suppressed. "Sarah!" "Let me finish this," she said softly. "We can talk after—" He nodded, releasing her face but keeping hold of her hand. She worked quickly now, making neat stitches while he breathed through the pain. When it was done, she bandaged the leg carefully and helped him to his bed. "You need to rest," she said, pulling a quilt over him. "I'll bring some broth." He caught her wrist, gentle but insistent. "Sit, please." She perched on the edge of the bed, acutely aware of the impropriety but unable to deny him. He looked vulnerable lying there, his usual strength diminished by pain and blood loss. "Who hurt you?" he asked quietly. "It doesn't matter. It's in the past." "It matters if it still haunts you." His thumb stroked over her wrist, soothing. "You're safe here, Sarah. I need you to know that, to believe it." Tears burned her eyes. "I do believe it. When I'm with you, She stopped, afraid to voice what she felt. "Tell me." "When I'm with you, I forget to be afraid." The admission came out in a whisper. "For the first time since it happened. I don't constantly look over my shoulder. I don't flinch when a man walks too close. You and Emma. This place you've given me back something I thought was lost forever." Jake tugged gently on her wrist, drawing her closer. "What's that?" "Peace," she breathed. "Hope. The belief that not all men are cruel." He lifted her hand to his lips, pressing a gentle kiss to her palm. "Some of us try not to be." The gesture sent warmth flooding through her, chasing away the cold memories. She should pull away, should maintain proper distance, but she couldn't, not when he looked at her like she was something precious, something worth protecting. "Papa?" Emma's small voice came from the doorway. "Is Papa going to die like Mama?" Sarah's heart broke at the fear in the child's voice. She held out her free arm, and Emma ran to her, burying her face in Sarah's skirts. "No, sweet girl. Papa's hurt, but he's going to be fine. See, he's right here." Jake reached out with effort, ruffling his daughter's hair. "Takes more than an ornery horse to keep me down, little one." Emma climbed carefully onto the bed, curling against Jake's uninjured side. "You scared me." "Scared myself, too," he admitted. "But Sarah took good care of me. She always takes good care of us, doesn't she? Emma nodded emphatically. She's the best, even better than Mrs. Robbins at stitching, and she doesn't smell like mothballs. Despite everything, Sarah laughed. Jake smiled too, though it was strained with pain. Emma, why don't you go draw Papa a picture? Sarah suggested. Something cheerful to hang where he can see it while he's getting better. The child brightened and scampered off. Alone again. Sarah moved to rise, but Jake held fast to her hand. Stay, he said, just a little longer. She settled back, and they sat in comfortable silence. His thumb traced patterns on her palm, and she found herself mesmerized by the gentle touch. I was thinking, he said eventually, about what you said, about being afraid. She tensed, but he continued softly. I know what it's like to carry fear. After Rebecca, I was terrified to care for anyone again. Thought if I kept my distance, kept my heart locked up tight, I couldn't be hurt like that again. Jake. But you changed that. He looked at her with those storm-gray eyes that saw too much. You walked into our lives with your quiet strength and your gentle ways. And suddenly the house felt alive again. Emma laughed again. And I started to feel things I'd sworn off forever. Sarah's breath caught. What kind of things? Hope, happiness, the desire to build something beyond mere survival. His voice roughened. The need to protect, to provide, to promise things I'm not sure I have the right to promise anymore. You have every right, she whispered fiercely. You're a good man. Jake McCrae, the best I've known. Good men don't let their wives die in childbirth. And good women don't get cornered in supply rooms. She met his surprised gaze steadily. We can't blame ourselves for the cruelties of this world. We can only choose how we move forward. He studied her for a long moment. And how do you want to move forward? Sarah. The question hung between them, heavy with possibility. She thought of her packed carpet bag from the night before, of the train ticket she'd planned to buy, of all the reasons she should leave. Then she thought of Emma's laughter, of quiet evenings by the fire, of this man who saw her truly and wanted her anyway. With you, she said simply. If you'll have me, not as hired help, not as a convenient solution to your domestic needs, but as whatever you'll let me be. Jake's hand tightened on hers. I know what I want you to be, but you've been hurt, rushed, treated as property by lesser men. I won't be another who assumes instead of asks. Then ask, she challenged softly. He pushed himself up despite her protests, needing to face her properly. Sarah Bennett, will you do me the honor of becoming my wife? Not because you need shelter or I need help with Emma, but because somewhere between your first day in that barn and this moment, I've fallen completely in love with you. The words she'd never thought to hear, offered freely by a man who'd earned the right to speak them. Sarah felt tears spill over, but for once they were tears of joy. Yes, she whispered. Yes, Jake. To all of it, to you, to Emma, to this life we're building together. He pulled her down for a kiss, gentle and reverent. A promise made without words. When they parted, both breathless. Emma stood in the doorway again, picture in hand and eyes wide. Does this mean Sarah's going to be my mama for real? Sarah opened her arms, and Emma flew into them. If you want me to be. I want it more than anything, Emma declared. Can we have a wedding with cake and flowers and everything? Jake laughed, wincing as it jarred his leg. Whatever you ladies want, though maybe we wait until I can stand for the ceremony. Sarah looked at her little family, wounded but healing, imperfect but hers, and felt peace settle deep in her bones. The past with all its pain was just that past. The future stretched before them, bright with promise despite the challenges ahead. We'll wait, she agreed, pressing a kiss to Emma's head and reaching for Jake's hand. We have all the time in the world. The blizzard struck without mercy, turning the world white and violent. Sarah had seen storms in Baltimore, but nothing like this Montana fury that shook the house and screamed through every gap in the walls. For 2 days now, they'd been trapped inside, the temperature dropping so low that ice formed on the inside of the windows despite the fires burning constant. Jake's leg was healing well, but he still couldn't put weight on it. He sat by the main fireplace, feeding it steadily, his face drawn with worry, not for himself. Sarah knew, but for the cattle, the horses, and most of all for Emma, who'd woken that morning with a fever. "It's just a cold," Sarah had said, trying to convince herself as much as Jake. But as the day wore on, Emma's condition worsened. Her small body burned with heat even as she shivered, and her breathing became labored, rattling in her chest. Now, as darkness fell on the second day, Sarah sat beside Emma's bed, bathing her forehead with cool cloths that seemed to do nothing against the raging fever. The child tossed restlessly, whimpering in her delirium.
Mama!
Emma cried out, and Sarah's heart clenched.
Mama, where are you?
"I'm here, sweet girl. I'm right here." But Emma's glazed eyes looked through her, seeing someone else. "Mama, don't go. Please don't go to heaven without me." Jake appeared in the doorway, having dragged himself up the stairs despite his injury. His face was haggard as he took in his daughter's state. "How is she?" "The fever won't break." Sarah's voice cracked. "Jake, we need the doctor." They both knew it was impossible. The storm had turned the road to town into an impassable drift of snow. No horse could make it through, and even if one could, Dr. Morrison was 15 miles away. "What do we do?" Jake's voice held a desperation that frightened Sarah more than the storm. This strong man who'd faced down threats and hardships was breaking before her eyes. Sarah forced herself to think past her fear. Her mother had been a midwife, had taught her things before the fever took her. Old remedies, passed down through generations of women who'd had nothing but wisdom and herbs to fight illness. "Willow bark," she said suddenly. "Do you have any—" "Maybe in the barn. Rebecca used to—" He stopped, pain flickering across his face. "I'll go look." "You can't. Your leg—" "I'll crawl if I have to." Sarah stood, gently settling Emma back against the pillows. "No. Tell me where to look. I'll go." "Sarah, no! The storm!" "The storm will kill her just as surely if we do nothing." She met his eyes, letting him see her determination. "I can make it to the barn and back. I have to—" He warred with himself. She could see it, the need to protect her battling against the desperate need to save his daughter. Finally, Emma's labored breathing decided him. "There's a rope tied to the porch post," he said. "It leads to the barn. I put it up for storms like this. Don't let go of it, not for a second. The willow bark, if there's any left, would be in a jar on the shelf by the door. Dried strips." Sarah nodded, already pulling on her heaviest shawl, Jake's coat over that. She wrapped her face until only her eyes showed, pulled on 2 pairs of mittens. "Sarah," Jake caught her arm as she passed. "If you can't find the rope, if anything feels wrong, you come back. Promise me." "I promise." She touched his face briefly. "Take care of her while I'm gone." The moment she opened the door, the storm tried to tear her away. The wind hit like a physical blow, driving snow and ice into every exposed inch. She couldn't see beyond her outstretched hand, the world reduced to a howling white void. Her fingers found the rope, and she gripped it like a lifeline. Step by step, she fought her way through the snow, sometimes sinking to her knees, sometimes crawling when the wind threatened to throw her down. The cold was beyond anything she'd experienced, burning her lungs with each breath. The barn door, when she finally reached it, was buried in drift. She dug frantically, her mittens already crusted with ice. Inside, the relative calm was shocking. The animals huddled together for warmth, their breath steaming in the frigid air. She found the shelf Jake had described, searching frantically among the jars and bottles. There, willow bark. Just a handful of strips left, but it would have to be enough. She stuffed the jar inside her coat and turned back to the door. The return journey was worse. The wind was at her back now, pushing her off balance, trying to tear her from the rope. Halfway back, her foot slipped on ice buried beneath the snow. She fell hard. The breath knocked from her lungs, and, for a terrifying moment, the rope slipped from her grasp. Panic clawed at her throat. Without the rope, she'd be lost in seconds, frozen to death within sight of the house. She scrabbled in the snow, fingers numb even through the mittens, until there her hand closed on the rough hemp, and she pulled herself up. By the time she stumbled through the door, she was more ice than woman. Jake was there, pulling her inside, stripping away the frozen layers. "My hands," she gasped. "Can't feel them." "Later," he said urgently. "The bark." She pulled out the jar, and he took it, limping hurriedly to the kitchen. Sarah followed on unsteady legs, her body shaking uncontrollably as it began to thaw. Together, they prepared the tea, Jake holding the cup while Sarah's hands were still too numb to function properly. Back in Emma's room, they managed to get a few spoonfuls of the bitter tea down her throat. Then there was nothing to do but wait, to pray, to hope. Sarah pulled Emma into her arms, cradling the child against her chest. She began to sing old lullabies her mother had sung, hymns from childhood, anything to fill the terrible silence between Emma's labored breaths. Jake sat on the other side of the bed, his hand resting on his daughter's burning forehead, his lips moving in what might have been prayer. The hours crawled by. Sarah's hands burned as feeling returned, but she ignored the pain, focused entirely on the child in her arms. She talked to Emma, telling her stories of Baltimore, of the ocean she'd seen once as a child, of all the things they'd do together when spring came. "We'll plant a garden," she whispered. "You can choose all the flowers, and we'll make jam from the berries. So much jam will be sticky all summer. Would you like that?" Emma stirred slightly, a soft whimper escaping her lips. "And your papa will teach you to ride properly. And I'll make you a new dress for the harvest dance. Something blue, to match your eyes when you smile." Jake made a sound that might have been a sob. Sarah reached across Emma to take his hand, their fingers intertwining over the child they both loved. "She's strong," Sarah said. "Like her father. She'll fight." "Like her mother, too," Jake said hoarsely. "Both of them." The words hung in the air, a declaration and a promise. Sarah bent to press a kiss to Emma's burning forehead, her tears falling onto the child's flushed cheeks. As dawn approached, Sarah felt the change before she understood it. Emma's breathing, while still rough, had lost that terrible rattling quality. Her skin, when Sarah touched it, felt cooler. "Jake," she barely dared to hope. I think the fever's breaking." He leaned forward, hands shaking as he felt his daughter's forehead, her cheeks. The wonder that spread across his face told Sarah what she needed to know. "Thank God," he breathed. "Thank God." Emma's eyes fluttered open, focusing with difficulty. "Papa?" Her voice was barely a whisper. "Sarah." "We're here, sweet girl." Sarah's voice broke on the words. "We're right here." Emma's gaze found Sarah's face, and a tiny smile curved her lips. "Mama," she said clearly, "you didn't go to heaven. You stayed." Sarah's breath caught. She looked at Jake, seeing her own realization mirrored in his eyes. Emma wasn't delirious now, wasn't calling for Rebecca. She was calling for her Sarah, the woman who'd fought through a blizzard to save her, who'd held her through the long dark night. "Yes, my darling," Sarah whispered. "I stayed. I'll always stay." Emma's eyes drifted closed again, but this time in healing sleep, the storm, as if sensing its defeat, began to quieten outside. Pale sunlight crept through the ice-covered windows. painting the room in soft gold. Jake reached across their daughter to cup Sarah's face, his thumb brushing away her tears. "You saved her. You risked everything and saved her." "We saved her," Sarah corrected. "Together." He leaned forward, pressing his forehead to hers. Emma safe between them. "I love you," he whispered. "Both of you, my girls." Sarah closed her eyes, feeling the truth of it settle into her bones. This was her family now, forged in crisis, strengthened by trial, bound by a love that had nothing to do with legal documents or social propriety. When the roads cleared, they'd make it official. But here, now, in this room filled with answered prayers and winter sunlight, they were already everything that mattered. Emma slept on, her breathing easy, while her parents kept watch. The storm had passed, leaving the world clean and new. And in the McCrae house, 3 hearts beat as one. A family not of blood or law, but of choice and courage and love strong enough to defy any storm. Spring arrived like a miracle after the harsh Montana winter, painting the valleys green and filling the air with the scent of wildflowers. Sarah stood on the porch, watching Emma chase butterflies through the meadow. Her laughter carried on the warm breeze. The child had recovered completely from her illness, though she now clung a bit closer to Sarah, called her Mama without hesitation. The change in Sarah herself was remarkable. Gone was the frightened girl who'd stepped off the train in December. Her hands, once soft from factory work, now bore the calluses of honest labor. Her face had gained color from the mountain sun, and her step held the confidence of a woman who'd found her place in the world. Jake emerged from the barn, his limp barely noticeable now. He'd been working since dawn, preparing for the spring cattle drive, when he saw her watching him. That slow smile spread across his face, the one that still made her heart skip after all these months. "Wool gathering again," he teased, climbing the steps to join her. "Planning," she corrected. "Emma needs new dresses for school come fall, and we'll need supplies for preserving when the berries ripen." Always thinking ahead. He slipped an arm around her waist, pulling her close. "One of the many things I love about you." She leaned into his warmth, content. They still hadn't formalized their arrangement. The winter had been too harsh, then the spring work too demanding. But it no longer mattered what the town thought. Here, they were a family. Jake Tom Morrison, the doctor's son, came riding up the path at full gallop. "Jake, you need to come quick!" Jake tensed, already moving toward his horse. "What is it?" "There's been an accident at the mine. Cave-in. They need every hand." Sarah's blood chilled. The Copper Creek mine employed half the men in the county, including several who'd become friends despite the town's initial coldness. "I'm coming with you," she said. "Sarah, no." "They'll need help with the wounded." She was already untying her apron. "Emma can stay with the Hendersons." Jake looked ready to argue, then nodded curtly. He knew better than to fight her when her mind was made up. Within minutes, they were riding toward town. Emma safely delivered to their nearest neighbor. The scene at the mine was chaos. Women clustered at the entrance, some weeping, others stone-faced with dread. Men covered in rock dust emerged periodically, carrying injured miners or shaking their heads grimly. Sarah immediately went to work, organizing the women into groups. "We need bandages, clean water, and a clear space for the wounded. You," she pointed to Mrs. Henderson, who'd arrived with several others. "Organize the food. These men will need sustenance when they emerge." Mrs. Henderson, who'd been so cruel months ago, nodded meekly and hurried to comply. Crisis had a way of stripping away petty prejudices. Throughout the day, Sarah worked tirelessly. She cleaned wounds, bandaged cuts, held the hands of men who cried for their mothers as she stitched gashes. Her dress was ruined with blood and dirt, but she didn't care. These were her people now, her community, and they needed her. Jake worked with the rescue crew, his strength invaluable in moving rocks and timber. Each time she caught sight of him, covered in dust but unharmed, Sarah breathed a prayer of thanks. As the sun began to set, a cry went up. They'd found the last group of trapped miners alive. The crowd surged forward as the men emerged, battered but breathing. Among them was Harold Whitman. Sarah's hands stilled on the bandage she was wrapping. She hadn't seen him since that ugly confrontation at the ranch. He looked different now, smaller somehow. His arrogance stripped away by hours trapped in the dark. His eyes found hers across the crowd. She waited for the sneer, the cutting remark. Instead, he simply nodded, a gesture that might have been acknowledgement, even respect. Then his wife was there, sobbing against his chest. And the moment passed. "You did good today, Doctor." Morrison appeared at her elbow, his own clothes as stained as hers. "Have you ever considered formal training? You've got natural healing hands." Sarah blinked in surprise. "I'm not educated enough for that." "Nonsense. You can read and write, can't you? And you've got instincts that can't be taught." He studied her thoughtfully. "I could use an assistant, someone to help with house calls, especially to the outlying ranches. The pay wouldn't be much, but I could teach you." Sarah looked for Jake, finding him helping to load an injured man onto a wagon. As if sensing her gaze, he turned. Even across the distance, she could see the pride in his eyes, the encouragement. "I'd need to discuss it with my family." "Doctor," Morrison smiled. "Family. Yes, I suppose that's what you are now. Aren't you? Well, think about it. The offer stands." That night, back at the ranch, Sarah told Jake about the doctor's proposition as they sat by the fire. Emma slept upstairs, exhausted from the excitement of staying with neighbors. "You should do it," Jake said immediately. "You've got a gift. Sarah, I saw it when you saved Emma, and again today. But the ranch, the house, we'll still be here. Doc Morrison's right, the community needs someone who can reach the outlying farms." He took her hand. "Besides, it's time things changed around here." "What do you mean?" Jake stood, pulling her up with him. "I mean, I'm tired of whispers and sideways looks. Tired of you not having my name when you've had my heart for months." Sarah's breath caught as he dropped to one knee, right there in their living room, producing a simple gold band from his pocket. "This was my grandmother's," he said. "She wore it for 50 years, through good times and bad. My mother wore it too, until she passed it to me for Rebecca. And now I want you to wear it." "Jake!" Tears blurred her vision. "Sarah Bennett, you came into our lives when we needed you most. You brought light back to this house, gave Emma a mother's love, and taught this stubborn cowboy that second chances are possible. Will you marry me? Not because we need to quiet gossip or make things proper, but because I can't imagine a single day without you." "Yes," the word came out on a sob. "Yes, Jake McCrae, I'll marry you." He slipped the ring onto her finger, then rose to kiss her. It was different from their careful, chaste exchanges. This was a claiming, a promise, a celebration of survival and new beginnings. When they parted, both breathless, he rested his forehead against hers. "When?" "Soon," she said. "Before the summer work gets too heavy. A simple ceremony. Just us and Emma and whoever wants to come." "And then you'll start working with Doc Morrison." She nodded, marveling at how he understood her, supported her dreams even when they went against convention. "If that's all right with you." "Sarah, love, you saved half the town today. They'd be fools not to want your help." He grinned. "Besides, I kind of like the idea of being married to the assistant doctor. Gives a man status." She laughed, swatting his arm. "You're terrible." "I'm yours," he corrected, pulling her close again. Terrible and all. They stood wrapped in each other as the fire crackled and the old house settled around them. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, wedding plans, Sarah's training, the continuing work of the ranch. But tonight, they were simply Jake and Sarah, two souls who'd found each other against all odds. A few weeks later, on a perfect June morning, they stood before the circuit preacher in the meadow behind the house. Emma, wearing the new blue dress Sarah had made, stood between them, holding tight to both their hands. The crowd was small but sincere. Dr. Morrison and his wife, the Hendersons' Mrs. Henderson, had actually apologized, citing Sarah's heroism at the mine, Tom Morrison and his young wife, and, surprisingly, Harold Whitman and his family. "Do you, Sarah Bennett, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband?" the preacher asked. Sarah looked at Jake, seeing not just the man who'd saved her that freezing night, but her partner, her best friend, her home. "I do." "Do you, Jake McCrae, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife?" "I do." His voice was strong, carrying across the meadow. "And do you, Emma McCrae, take this woman to be your mama, official and forever?" The preacher's unconventional addition made several people chuckle, but Emma answered solemnly, "I do. She already is, but yes. Then, by the power vested in me by the territory of Montana, I pronounce you husband and wife, and a family complete. You may kiss your bride, Jake." As Jake drew her close, Sarah heard the cheers of their neighbors, felt Emma tugging on their joined hands, saw their future spreading out like the Montana sky, vast and full of possibility. She'd come west seeking survival and found so much more. "I love you, Mrs. McCrae," Jake murmured against her lips. "And I love you," she whispered back. "Both of you, forever." The wedding feast was simple venison and vegetables. Bread Sarah had baked that morning, and a cake Mrs. Henderson had insisted on making as a peace offering. As the sun set over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, Sarah danced with her husband while Emma spun in circles nearby, her laughter bright as birdsong. This was her family, her home, her future. Not the one she'd planned when she'd answered that advertisement, but infinitely better. Sometimes, Sarah reflected, the best gifts came disguised as hardships, and the greatest loves grew from the rockiest soil. The music played on, fiddle notes floating across the meadow, and Sarah McCrae danced in the arms of her cowboy, finally and forever home. 3 years had passed since that June wedding in the meadow. Sarah stood in the doorway of their expanded home, watching the sunrise paint the Montana mountains gold. Her medical bag sat by the door, ready for the day's rounds. Dr. Morrison had been right about her natural abilities. She'd become indispensable to the scattered ranches and farms, bringing babies into the world, tending injuries, fighting the fevers that came with each season. "Mama, look what I drew." Emma, now 7 and sprouting like a weed, ran up with her latest creation. The picture showed their family, Jake tall and strong, Sarah with her medical bag, Emma in the middle, and a small addition, a baby in Sarah's arms. Sarah's hand went unconsciously to her still flat stomach. She hadn't told anyone yet, not even Jake, wanting to be sure, but Emma, with a child's intuition, seemed to already know. "It's beautiful, sweetheart. Why don't you go show Papa he's in the barn?" Emma scampered off, braids flying. Sarah smiled, remembering the scared, silent child she'd first met. Now Emma was confident, bright, top of her class at the new schoolhouse. She still called Sarah Mama with the same reverence she'd used that feverish night years ago. The sound of approaching horses drew Sarah's attention. Jake emerged from the barn, Emma perched on his shoulders. As 2 riders approached, Sarah recognized Tom Morrison and, surprisingly, Harold Whitman. "Sarah, Jake." Tom called out. Dismounting. "We've got news from town. There's talk of statehood Montana might join the Union within the year." "About time," Jake said, setting Emma down. "What brings you all the way out here to tell us?" Harold cleared his throat, looking uncomfortable. It was still strange, this tentative friendship that had grown since the mine accident. There's more. They're forming committees, looking for community leaders. Tom here suggested Jake for the agricultural committee, and... He paused, seeming to struggle with the words. I suggested Sarah for the medical board. If we're going to be a state, we need proper healthcare standards. Sarah's breath caught. But I'm not a real doctor. You've delivered half the babies in this county. Tom interrupted. Saved more lives than I can count. Doc Morrison says you know more about frontier medicine than most city-trained physicians. Jake's hand found Sarah's shoulder, warm and supportive. She'll think about it, he said. Won't you, love? She nodded, overwhelmed. From abandoned mail-order bride to potential medical board member, the journey seemed impossible. Yet, here she was. After the men left, Jake found her sitting on the porch swing Rebecca had loved, the one he'd finally been able to use again after Sarah came into their lives. Quite a day for news, he said, settling beside her. I have some of my own. She took his hand, placing it on her stomach. Emma's picture. She knows things sometimes. Jake, I'm expecting. The joy that transformed his face was like sunrise itself. He pulled her close, burying his face in her hair. Are you sure? As sure as I can be. I've helped deliver enough babies to know the signs. He pulled back to look at her, touching her face with reverent fingers. Another child? Our child. Are you happy? Happy, he laughed, the sound rich and full. Sarah, you've given me everything. A second chance at love, a mother for Emma, a partner in all things. And now this, I'm beyond happy. They sat in comfortable silence, watching Emma play with the barn cats. The ranch had prospered these past years. The house bore fresh paint, the barn was expanded, and a small medical office had been added for Sarah's practice. But more than physical improvements, there was life here again, laughter, hope, future. I was thinking, Jake said eventually, about what Tom said. The medical board, you should do it. But the baby, we'll have the smartest, most capable mother in Montana, and a father who can handle things when she's needed elsewhere. He grinned. Besides, Emma's been wanting to help more with the ranch work. She can take on some of your chores. Sarah leaned into him, marveling at this man who supported her dreams so completely. How did I get so lucky? Luck had nothing to do with it. He kissed her temple. We earned this, Sarah. Every bit of it. That evening, as they gathered for supper, Emma presented her drawing formally. For the new baby, she announced, so they know they're already loved. Sarah hugged her daughter, for that's what Emma was, in every way that mattered. Thank you, sweet girl. Should we tell the baby about how our family came to be? Yes, Emma settled into her chair, eyes bright. Tell about the train station, and the mean man, and how Papa rescued you like a knight. Jake laughed. I think your mama rescued us, little one. We rescued each other, Sarah corrected, serving the stew she'd had simmering all day. That's what families do. As they ate, they told the story Emma never tired of hearing how a desperate young woman stepped off a train into bitter cold and uncertainty, how a grieving widower offered shelter, how a lonely child found her mother. They talked about the challenges overcome, the gossips silenced, the love that grew despite or perhaps because of the hardships. And now we're getting a baby, Emma concluded happily. And Mama might be on the medical board, and Papa's going to help make Montana a real state. Lord help Montana, Jake teased, but his eyes were warm as he looked at his family. Later, after Emma was in bed and the house had settled into quiet, Sarah and Jake sat by the fire. She was working on tiny clothes for the baby while he mended harness leather, the comfortable routine of 1,000 such evenings. Do you ever think about if things had gone differently? Jake asked suddenly. If Harold had kept you, if I hadn't been in town that day. Sarah set down her sewing. Sometimes, but then I think about everything that wouldn't have happened. Emma calling me Mama. You and I finding each other. This new life growing inside me. Even my work with Doc Morrison. She smiled. God works in mysterious ways. Jake, what seemed like the worst day of my life led to all the best ones. He set aside his work and pulled her onto his lap, hands gentle on her still flat belly. Have I told you today that I love you? Only about 12 times, she teased. Not nearly enough then. He kissed her, soft and sweet. I love you, Sarah McCrae. I love our family, our life, our future. I love that you still blush when I look at you certain ways, and that you stand up to anyone who threatens what's ours. I love that you've made this house a home again. Sarah curled into him, safe and cherished, outside. Snow began to fall, not the violent blizzard of that terrifying night years ago, but soft, gentle flakes that covered the world in pristine white. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. There would be morning sickness to navigate, board positions to consider, a ranch to run, and a child to raise soon-to-be children. But tonight, in this house that had seen such sorrow and now held such joy, Sarah McCrae rested in her husband's arms and knew that she was exactly where she belonged. The scared girl at the train station was gone, transformed into a woman of strength and purpose, a healer, a mother, a wife. Jake, she said softly. Yes, love. Thank you for taking a chance on a desperate stranger, for seeing more in me than I saw in myself. He tightened his arms around her. Thank you for being brave enough to stay, for teaching us how to live again instead of just survive. The fire crackled. The snow continued to fall, and in the McCrae house, 3 hearts soon to be 4 beat in perfect contentment. It wasn't the life Sarah had planned when she'd answered that mail-order bride advertisement in Baltimore. It was infinitely, impossibly better, as she drifted off to sleep in Jake's arms. Sarah thought she heard Emma singing upstairs the same lullabies Sarah had taught her, now being practiced for a sibling yet to come. The circle of love continued, strong and unbroken, beneath the vast Montana sky. And in the morning, there would be new dreams to chase, new lives to save, new memories to build. But that was tomorrow. Tonight, there was only this, a family forged in winter's cold, tempered by trials, and bound by a love that had transformed them all. The abandoned mail-order bride had found her cowboy. The widower had found new love. The motherless child had found her mama. And together, they'd built something beautiful from the ashes of their separate sorrows, under Montana's endless sky, in a humble ranch house filled with laughter and hope. They'd written their own story, one of courage, resilience, and the miraculous power of love to heal even the deepest wounds. Home, family, future, all the things Sarah Bennett had sought when she'd boarded that train were hers now, multiplied beyond her wildest dreams. And as the snow continued to fall, blanketing the world in fresh possibility, Sarah McCrae smiled and held tight to everything she'd never dared to hope for, but somehow, against all odds, had found. Thank you so much for listening to this story of love and resilience in the Wild West. I'd love to know where you're listening from. Please share in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe to From Wild West channel and let me know your thoughts on Sarah and Jake's journey. Did their story touch your heart as much as it touched mine? Share your favorite moment in the comments.